some things have a easier learning curve than other things. So that's where, like, I think the front squat's a great exercise. It does have a little bit of a learning curve, but some people pick it up really well. And for some people, it kind of exposes them right to the problems they have. For other people, the pause squats are really great because, I mean, what do most people want to do? They just want to go fast and, muscle through.
How do you
tip forward a little bit, muscle through, and it's like,
where do you pause, and how do you teach? Do they pause on the way down, or do they pause on the bottom, or do they pause when they slightly come up? Where do you have them pause?
Normally it's just like pause at the bottom, so kind of just right around parallel, maybe a little bit below that.
Okay.
And yeah, because it just, to me, the pause squat, usually we'll have them do like a tiny bit narrower than a wider stance and a high bar. So it kind of takes away all the advantages of like your back and your hips. And it just forces you to kind of control the weight more with the legs and the back. So to me, that really helps both with the strength and the form. But the form is critical because if you squat more and more and more, but you're always kind of falling forward at the bottom, then it's like no matter how much strength you build in the sort of the 90% of the range of motion, that's the top 90%. If you're always like throwing yourself out of position at the bottom 10% of the range of motion, how much of a carryover is all your training going to give you? It's going to be small.
Yeah.
But if you say, well, I'm not using my strength because I'm losing it mostly on, losing my position at the bottom of a squat. Well, if I spend a lot of time focusing on the bottom of a squat, I mean, to me, it makes sense. I'm going to gain strength out of it. And I think that's one where doing a high bar squat is an easier learning curve than front squats for a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people are flexible enough where they can do the front squats no problem, but they're hard because they're not strong at them, which is perfect.
Yes.
It's a perfect reason to do them. But I think everything has to have a progression. I've been having a lot of my clients do good mornings, which at first I was just like, I need to make sure my clients don't get hurt doing this.
Yeah, it's a scary
But what
thing.
people have to think about is like, I think, any exercise can be done where you start off at the right weights, the right volume, and you just gradually build it up. That's the patience and kind of what you have to do. And eventually those really hard moves become very beneficial as, giving you a carryover. Whereas you can do other lifts, like a back squat, which should be normal and safe, but you do it too much with too bad a form, and all of a sudden that hurts you. So,
and then you reinforce bad technique on a competitive lift.
Yeah. So it kind of goes back to the whole point of like, do enough to make progress, but don't overdo it where you're getting ahead of yourself. Whether it's, I think that's really for like any like way you look at the training, whether it's the whole like, training protocol or it's just one exercise.
Mm-hmm. What would be your key indicator lifts for the bench press then?
I think for different people that varies a lot, but I think that's one where you have to find it. And there's so many exercises you just need to, like for me, I like, incline bench. I like shoulder pressing. I like dumbbell pressing. I like dumbbell bench.
That's a funny point that you brought up because there are,
you can't do them all.
There's so many movements where with squat and pulls, it's I'm not going to say it's limited, but you don't have, it's like you can squat, you can good morning, you can pull. There's what the fuck else are you going to do?
I think with the squatting, I mean, a lot of it comes down to your skill level, which is comes from practicing the same things like enough. But I think benching, the technique for benching, I don't think is as complicated. And I think the trick is getting bigger and more jacked. You need bigger arms and chest and shoulders. You can execute better technique, but that's not going to get you a 500 or 600 pound bench.
True.
Only by gaining muscle. That's kind of where I look at it as like, it's a lot like bodybuilding. I mean,
yes.
The other thing, and just as a personal thing, why would you want to bench a lot and not look like it either? So,
well, aside from that, you make a good point, because another critical factor I think in benching big and benching well is to be able to stay tight.
Yeah.
But you can't flex bone. You know what I'm saying? You can't flex skin and you can't flex fat. So the only way you can get tight is to have muscles to actually make tight. And while you could be teaching, or I could be, or any of us could be teaching somebody how to bench press and how to pack their shoulders and get everything tight, how to tighten their lats. If they don't have any fucking lats, what are they going to get tight?
Right.
Their triceps. Yeah. They got to build the shit up, and then it starts. So it is. You're 100% correct. It's bodybuilding and repetition type of work, which is, it's odd because it's so vastly different than the squat and deadlift that it's like higher rep protocols work better, and where the squat and pulls, it's like singles, triples, maybe fives if you have your inhaler that day. You know what
Well, it goes to the point, if we say like technique is paramount, well, technique divides into sort of like, the concept of doing it. Like if I give you an empty bar, does your technique look right? But now when we put more and more and more weight on, what causes you to fail to execute the technique? Well, that would be a lack of strength. So if you can't stay tight because your lats don't have the strength to stay tight once the weight gets up to a certain point, well, now your technique fails because you're weak. And that's where I think with the bench, once you can execute the technique properly, you just need to get stronger.
Mm-hmm.
With the squat, there's a lot of that too, but there's also just a lack of execution of, you can give somebody an empty bar or like, 1 or 2 plates if they're kind of a bigger guy, and it can still be a pretty ugly squat, and
Yeah.
you put a lot of work in with poor form and you don't get quite as much back.
And this is going to make everyone heads explode. We train lighter than we've ever have.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember answering a question about 6 months ago on the forum, and they were asking about technique and whatever. And I said, do you do very good technique with 185? He's like, oh yeah. And I said, well, isn't it crazy how if you use the appropriate load, your technique is better?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like, and so I was like, I remember thinking, well, the reason why some of these kids can't do X, Y, and Z is not because they're weak. It's just, or they don't want to. It's just because the load's too heavy.
Yeah.
And so most of the older kids realize this, like, don't take it personal if you get your workout sheet for the next 3 weeks and it's lighter than you thought. Don't take it personal. I'm trying to set you up for the long haul. We got 8 months of this shit. You know? And the other thing is, at no point should you look at your paper or get under a bar, you should be stressed about the weight. I don't mean that in a bad way. Meaning, like you and I could, we're box squatting on Fridays, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, holy shit, I don't know.
Yeah.
I never want those kids to feel that. I only want to feel the stress of, listen, I know I can get 8,
mm-hmm.
but maybe I can get 9. I never want to be like, I don't even know if I can get 1.
Yeah.
I don't want that to happen. I want them to have the higher rep records create stress, so to speak. I don't know if I don't want them freaked out.
Yes.
How many times I've seen kids when they don't follow my directions, they take out a weight and just,
yeah.
I'm like, well, now you've not had any success. Now you know you can't do it. Like during the season with my older kids, if I watch their bar speed, I'm like, listen, you don't go up anymore. You're just staying there.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, why? I'm like, well, I don't want you to know that you're weak.
Yeah.
I want you to have success. So, and I know this sounds stupid, but the lighter and better the reps that we train with, the stronger the kids get overall. And
it becomes the art of coaching though too, because percentages are hard to implement across the board.
We use percentages, but everything is based on bar speed.
Yeah.
And people say, well, what's their training max? And I'm like, I don't know. I just look at them and I'm like, well, that looks like that should be about their 8 rep set, their bar speed. So we're going to dictate that based on that. But when you actually go and start, if they could bench 315, then you look at their training max, like, oh, it's really low.
Yeah.
Really. And then I think it gets, for the squat and the deadlift, you can train much lighter. And we've found this out at Westside. You can train much lighter than you think you can. And still get very, very strong. And so the reason why in sports, why it's so important is because you got to do all this other shit, and so that allows you to train year round with great bar speed. And then when maybe we'll do a test week, all of a sudden, like, oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had a kid, a senior, who I don't think he deadlifted over 250, 255, something like that. And he pulled 365 for 5. He wanted to, and I was like, yeah, let's do it. He's like, oh my God, what happened? I'm like, well, and then the next day I'm like, how you feeling? He's like, I feel like shit.
Yeah.
Like, that's why we don't do that.
Well, I think this is
I really didn't worry about getting specific for a meet until like 3 or 4 weeks out. And then I would worry about like dialing things in. So like usually 4 weeks out. And then eventually as I got further on 3 weeks out, I would take like an opener and a section. That was like the only thing I needed straight weight. So I don't ever just use just the barbell. I was always chains or bands or something and just pushing heavy weight. I didn't really have much of a plan until like 4 weeks out.
Well, if you get to the 8 to 4 weeks out, Is it a barbell or is it a safety squat bar?
Still rotating.
So still rotating
until about at 4 weeks out, it would be like a straight bar, or sometimes if I'm feeling like beat up in the shoulders, I might throw on like a buffalo bar or something like that. But generally, 4 weeks until the meet is when I go to just a straight bar.
All right, and then all those other rotations, are they based upon how do you think through those rotations? I believe you're thinking from the day forward. You're not looking at like this year, and back in a year back.
I'm like making decisions week by week.
Yes. All right. Yeah. So with that, what determines if the exercise is going to change or not going to change?
For the most part, I'd like to see them changing every week. Like I said, through most of the time, not much determined it. I would say that as I got closer to a meet, I started dialing back on some of the crazy AR and wanted more, call it real weight, call it whatever you want to. But farther out would be a lot more accommodating resistance and a lot more frequency of bars like the giant cambered bar and things like that. As we got closer, and safety squat bar, as we got closer to meets, I generally deviated from bars like the spider bar or the safety squat bar, and I'd pick Duffalo bar, occasionally the straight bar, cambered bar, things that allowed me to replicate like my actual competition squat a little bit more, and then start like dialing back on some of the AR as I got closer to a meet.
Do you find that some of the bars need more than 1 week because you need a week just to get reacclimated to the bar?
Not so much at this point, but like early on, yeah, especially with like the safety squat bar is my nemesis. So if I'm going to do well on that, that would have to be something that I'd need a couple weeks to really prepare myself for. Which makes sense, actually, knowing that's my nemesis now. It's something that I probably should have used more because my quads, like I said, they were less dominant, and I think that's part of it, is that bar exposes you and pulls me a little bit forward, and I should have probably been on that bar more. I ran from it a little bit. My training partner that I did, I just ran from it.
Well, yeah, everybody does to a certain degree. Like, we all tell people to do the shit that you don't like, but you only do the stuff that you kind of don't like. So what does the supplemental movements look like for the squat full?
So on that main squat day, we've done everything from days where we would just come and squat and then go home. Because like I said, at one point I was running a crew of like 15 guys.
Well, squat's rough as fuck too.
I had some real success when I had my heavy squat day, and when I would get done, I would do like 10 singles on the deadlift with some fairly strong band tension. Nothing crazy on the weight. So you might have like 315 to 405, but with like strongs and lights or strongs and an average. And I would just practice my form, very similar to what I would do with my squats on Wednesday. And then on Wednesday, which was my like secondary squat day, if you want to call it that, that's when I would do my heavier pulls. So I kind of just flipped them. I was actually deadlifting twice a week, but the deadlifts that I did after I squatted on Saturday was always very light and just purposeful. A lot of times I'd pull off like 2 mats and just practice my setup just to get some reps in.
Is the deadlift most of the weeks on the heavy day?
Yeah, I did most of the heavy day. I would just get my squats done. I would go in, you called it my technique day. I would do my technique day with squats, and then I would hammer the deadlifts. That was like it's almost like I had a max effort deadlift day on Wednesdays. And I got tons of crap about how heavy I deadlifted. But my best deadlifts came when I was deadlifting the most often and the heaviest.
How much variation with those?
So not much, other than I varied the band tension. It was weird. My best deadlifts, and I was never a great deadlifter. That was always the lift that I struggled the most with. My best deadlifts came when I was really messing with like crazy band tension. It was Bruce Mason had this idea that he wanted to test out on me. When he thought he was done competing, he basically reached out and he's like, I need to fix your deadlift, but I need to work with you. And he basically said, you're crazy, so you like to go heavy, and that's what's killing you. He's like, but I think I've got the solution. He started using crazy band tension so it wouldn't beat up my lower back, but I was still getting sort of I was getting to feel heavy weight. Like it was still challenging to me. It was fun because I like going heavy. I was still getting the feeling of heavy weight in my hands, and I'm pulling against bands all the time. Then he tells me, just go enter this meet. So I enter a meet deadlift only, and he tells me to open with, I think it was like 760, which I had never pulled 760, and that was my opener. And I hadn't pulled over 700 in the gym. I thought the guy was nuts, but the only way to prove that he was wrong was to listen to him, because I did let him coach me a few times. I let someone tell me what to do. And so in my attempt to prove him wrong, he proved himself right, and I pulled 800 pounds. So I'm like, oh, turns out that's another good thing. Sometimes it doesn't have to make sense to
So
me.
when you say crazy band tension, what are you talking about?
I mean, I think at one point I had strong average. It was like nutty shit.
Like 600 at the top?
Yeah, like insane amounts of band tension to the point where like it was comical almost. Like everything was either fast or nothing because like you'd get caught up in those bands.
So what was the bar weight? Like 225? Yeah.
315, 365, like stuff like that. Like I said, I in no way thought I was prepared to pull, but he basically said, trust that you know what to do and it'll be there. And it was.
Okay.
I thought my back was the limiting factor because I would come out of the hole and just get kind of bent over. So I was like, well, I'm getting stuck because my back's not strong enough. And it's like, no, it's getting stuck because my quads are basically getting out of the way as soon as possible because I don't have the strength to stay under the weight. So yeah, that was kind of where my evolution came in. But once I started training the quads as like a priority, not just like after back squatting, but first on its own day, it was like, okay, I just made years of continuous progress before I really had to, get smarter again.
Yeah.
But it also took a bit to evolve my technique to use the quads because if you're used to just breaking the hips and sitting back, it takes a lot of very specific effort to like load your knees on the way down if you're not used to that. So to allow your knees to kind of get out in front of you a little bit.
How'd you go about that? Focus and intent?
What I did was when I would do my back squats, so this was at a time where my best was like 600. And anything above 550, my form was going to start turning into a good morning. And so I kept all of my training at, like 500, 520, 525. So things like that, where I could execute them with the form that I wanted. And then I piggybacked, I basically bolstered that with just a ton of quad training. When I started doing paused high bar squats, that really enabled me to start practicing letting the knees travel on the way down, feeling the quads kind of loading on the way down. If you watch most people squat, there's kind of like this fear of like getting into the hole and getting stuck. So there's always like either cutting depth or this like, it's just like this urgency about coming out of the hole, which is good. But, you should feel confident and balanced in the hole. I mean, most people probably lose most of their squatting power by getting out of position at the bottom. Whatever if you put, let's say you measured your leg strength by how much you could leg press. If you increase your strength by 10%, but then every time you actually do a barbell squat, you tip forward a little bit at the bottom, you're going to see like 1% of that strength, not 10%. So most people have a lot of strength that they are already just not tapping into in their squat, of course. And if you can comfortably pause at the bottom of your squat without sinking, shifting, bouncing, and then just drive up through the weight with power, and you're going to just tap into the strength that you've already got in the first place. There's nothing revolutionary to do a pause squat. Yeah. But it was something that I utilized very heavily, like in my main 3 sort of lifts always.
Well, with pause squats, tempo squats, those type of variations of the movement, I think a lot of people lean away from because they want to find the sexier variation. Yeah. Where those type of variations are going to allow you to kind of have a feedback loop to know where the tension should feel throughout the squat.
Yes, practicing your craft,
Yeah. So when I talk to a lot of you guys, it's the one thing that I think a lot of lifters miss is you know where the tension should be from the time you start the lift all the way down through. And when that tension shifts, you automatically know what to do to get it back to where it is. Yeah. Which is a concept, people aren't going to get because they don't have the time under the bar to be able to develop that. But I also think they're not focusing either on what they should be feeling.
Well, I think you have to appreciate the importance of what you're trying to get out of the pause squat or the tempo squat so that you will do it the right way. Because the last thing I want to do in the gym is go and bust my ass doing something that I don't think is going to work. And so like if you do a certain lift that has like a tempo and you rush the tempo or you rush the tempo at the critical point in the tempo, and it's like you're doing all this lifting and you're getting nothing out of it. You're just kind of getting this like kind of a squat, kind of a pause squat. It's kind of a lighter squat, but it's kind of a pause. So yeah, you got to be really specific. You've got to be, your own harshest critic, I think. You got to demand what you're capable of, which is your best, and not to just kind of let your, felt discomfort kind of get you
it's going to suck. I mean, but that should be like a given. The
way I saw it was like whatever I could do a perfect pause squat with the high bar, I'm probably getting about a 10% carryover from that. So if I can increase that, then I know that when I go to the meet, I'm confident that I'm going to hit the target at the meet if those 10% numbers line up.
Do they always kind of line up?
When I did the one meet where I broke Sandberg's squat record, which was 783. I squatted like 784. That Monday leading up to the meet, I did 705 for like a perfect 1 rep paused high bar squat, which is pretty much exactly like that. And so I knew that like if I could hit that, like I was going to go in confident in hitting, my meet targets. So obviously when you go through a meet training, if you're nailing everything that you've got lined up and you're also not like half-assing, you feel confident when you go into the meet. If you're missing reps in training, like it's hard to know what to expect sometimes.
What you said about the ability to think while you're straining really hits home to me because the first 5 meets I did were sleeved, totally raw squats, and prior to that, just sports training. I didn't know anything about wraps. So when I got into wraps, 2.5 years ago, it was brand new to me, and I found there's different technical cues that are really important with wraps. And so while with a sleeve squat, and say a deadlift, which I'd done plenty of times before, I could use like nose torque or ammonia and get very psyched up for the lift. I purposely did not use that for wrap squats because I wanted to keep my mind more focused and calmer actually, which is ironic because the weight was so heavy, but still I wanted to think about pushing my hips forward, sinking into the wraps at the bottom, and not just be in this kind of like blind rage.
Yeah, I think for like something I think about too with the squatting is this, like, especially with wraps, when I'm going to do my max, especially like a third attempt at a meet, the things I want to think about are, I'm going to unrack it and feel like, I don't know if I'm going to come up with this weight.
Yeah.
I know I've prepared for it, but this feels, it's heavy.
Just because it feels heavy.
I've never done anything.
You can't do it.
So, you have to remember, like, what are the right things to think about and what are the, all the distractions. So to me, it's like a couple cues that I just focus on, which are not like micromanaging body parts, but it's just like, get the weight, and take my time, get a really strong full breath of air, brace hard until I'm like basically trembling, and then make sure that my balance sits hard on the heels so I'm not bracing and then rocking on the toes and then rushing into the squat. So if I do all those things, get the air, brace really hard, let the weight sink in down to my heels.
Push the knees out.
But then once I'm there, I attack the descent. So I do everything to set myself up for success, but I still need to attack it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. When you're afraid of the weight, do you attack it? Or do you kind of quit before it, it even happens?
Yeah.
Ed Cohen was talking about that. If you change your descent because it feels heavy,
fucked.
When you make these like last minute, adjustments on your strategy, that's where you already lost.
I never saw like multiply lifters or like really strong people ever say anything bad about single ply or raw. But I saw lots of raw and single ply guys bash multiply. And I never really understood that. Only thing I could think of it is like crabs in a bucket, they're trying to pull you back down and people at the top are trying to pull you up. But it was just a weird phenomenon to watch. Like I never saw like no lifters at Westside ever. If someone came in and like, oh, I use, compete in this federation. Oh, you're, you need to get on drugs or nobody ever said that, but it goes the other way. Like, single ply will set a record and, you say, well, why don't you put double ply? Oh, that's cheating.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in a way from what you're saying, it silenced the sport because they just quit posting, so when they were posting before, it's all getting tore up.
Yeah.
So the answer to that is they just don't post.
That's why I don't have footage of my 1205. My girlfriend filmed it, and then Hoff, I can't remember what he lifted, but his video went up the next day and he just started getting torn apart. My girlfriend was editing the video and I told her, don't post it. And then like a month later, like the file was like, I said, let's post it. And she went to get it and the whole file was corrupt and didn't have any footage or nothing. So I have a picture. That's it. But it was because I was like, I'm not getting up there and getting torn apart. Like, screw that, you know. And three whites, I'm good.
Well, I think that's kind of across the board, though. It's easier. What you see mostly in all powerlifting, to be honest, is more training clips than you ever will competitive clips. You know, and because of competitive, and it's weird, like it's powerlifting is just fucking weird, right? Because training lifts get judged online. You know, like it can be a safety bar squat with gear on that is being called, it's not a legal depth.
Oh, someone posted a video, one board, you know, a lot of spotters hold their hands on the bar now. I don't like that. I just think it changes the groove every time. I remember reading something about it where it's like, it can add like 5% to your lifts and because you can control bar power. But, you know, a lot of people for safety, you know, they have a lot of weights. So one board, someone in the comments like, oh, that's an illegal lift. The guy's hands are on the bar. I'm like, what? It's a training lift.
It's a fucking one board too. like when is a one board judged?
Yeah. I always like that. I don't see how that helps. Okay. Like, fair enough. Good for you. Like, I don't have time to explain it in my comments. My favorite one is like, how much can you lift raw though? It's like, seriously? You know, I remember, like when I went to Westside, one of the first workouts, Tony, we were doing rolling dumbbell extensions. And I pick up the 80s and I do like 12 reps and it's pretty hard, you know, having to dig deep to get 12 reps. Tony picks up the 100s, does 20, throws them down, picks up the 120s, does 20, picks up the 140s, does 20. And I go, that's why he benches 800 pounds. I just saw the connection. And I've never seen another guy do rolling extensions for 20 with 140, you know, but, you know, Tony would put up raw numbers. I saw him doing 900 like camber bar squat, you know, like nothing for 2 reps. Just insane stuff. And Billy Minna used to come over and train, and he said the same thing. I've never seen anyone as strong as Tony. I saw Greg Panora do a close grip 550 on the football ball. Just shit like that, you know. And then people would say that we were weak. I'm like, what? You know, and now you got that one guy, what's his name? He almost benching 800 raw, you know. And I think to myself, okay, like I was benching 910. I had about a 600 pound raw bench. Like 585 was my best that I actually tested, you know, but it wasn't a max. I always was scared I was going to blow something off. You know, I'd hear those stories. So, you know, so say 600. So I was getting about 300 pounds out of the bench shirt, you know, and I worked with Bill Crawford and guys like that. I really, every single piece to me was a piece that could be improved, you know. So you had to focus, like to be the best, you had to try to dial in as much as possible. But so, you know, I was getting 300 pounds out of the bench. So I'm going, okay, if this guy's benching 800 raw, Jimmy's benching 1,400. Now he benched 1,100 in single ply too. You know, Jimmy probably has a 700 plus raw bench if he wanted to, right? But he doesn't. You know, he's multiply. Just as is it Julius? I think his name is Julius. He doesn't want to put on a bench shirt and go for 1,300. It's different, and you can respect each other, and neither of you has to be negative towards each other. It's a different. Essentially it's a different sport.
It's different.
Yeah,
you know,
and I see guys, you know, they got the new Kabuki bar or whatever for the deadlift, and you know, Dan Griggs is pulling over. You know, he almost pulled 1,100. Impressive. You know, oh, but you can't compare it. No, but that's what makes the sport fun. Like if gear doesn't get better, or bars don't get better, or equipment doesn't get better, like the monolift doesn't get invented, the sport wouldn't progress. And then what fun is it? But as the sport progresses, it's like all tides raise simultaneously.
Well, going back to your marketing background, it creates more dialogue. It creates more story. It's more conversations. Good or bad, they're fucking talking about it.
Right.
You know, and if not, then it's just, you know, becomes more and more silent. With you being in there after my time there, and when I say we didn't use gear, we didn't use gear. I mean, we trained and competed and put it on. It becomes a whole other battle, you know, to try to figure out the 300 pounds in the carryover for the bench shirt. And that becomes very strategic, right? Because you have to be strong enough to use the shirt, A, which you're not always in that position all year round, right? Maybe not. And then B, it beats the shit out of you, when you do put it on. So you can't put it on too often.
Right.
So what kind of balance did you find to be able to get in the shirt, but yet still be able to not beat the shit out of yourself, for one thing, and in it enough to be able to actually learn the skill? Because the difference now from what I'm hearing and seeing and kind of just my own fucking around is the learning curve for the band shirts is much shorter than the learning curve for a poly shirt, which is kind of where they evolve to, where it may take 2 years for somebody to learn the poly. Some people never learn the poly shirt. But to learn it, you have to acquire that skill. So how did you go about that?
Yeah. When you first get a shirt, you got to actually learn the groove of the shirt and figure out where it's going to stop you and those kind of things. And then from there, it's about, okay, like how do I train to be strong in those positions, right? And I was a big fan of board presses.
Did you do anything to break it in?
Yeah, you'd wet, put it on, put it as high as you can, wet it, you essentially, and then work down the boards.
Mm-hmm.
Can you touch a 4-board? Yeah. Can you touch the 3-board? And Bill Crawford actually, Sebastian Burns is who taught me most of the shirt stuff. He would come over to Washington to Tommy Fannon's place when he was out there, and I would go over. But basically, like what Sebastian told me was, you want to learn to touch in the lightest weight possible. So, can you take 225 and almost touch? And if you're really good, like that groove, you can, because you tuck your elbows, tuck your heart, and you learn the patience. So I always wanted to learn when I got a shirt, it was always, okay, what's the lightest that I can get down to like a 1-board, because I know with the heavy weight, it'll touch.
Yeah.
But that was something a lot of other lifters wouldn't do. They would load the weight to try to touch. They wouldn't try to learn, how do I conform to touch it? How do I raise up to the barbell versus pull the barbell down? How do I roll my wrists to go lower without dumping? Those are all like little tricks that Metal Militia started really teaching. Because they learned it in the denim, and the denim was fucking brutal to try to touch in the denim, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it was like technique was the most important thing in the equipment, right? And then once you figured out, okay, where's the groove, where I'm going to be, now we can start loading the weight up. And then once I knew that the shirt, I'm going to be good in this shirt, once a month I could get it and see how it fit, see how it felt. We would move it around. We learned little tricks about folding the sleeves and stuff like that. How do we set the neckline? Like how do we get more? How do we get less? So there was a lot that went into the poly. Like you had to learn the shirt and like what position would let you do this and this. And then when you went to a meet, a lot of times you had no idea if you said, okay, that felt like 95%. Let's jack the shit out of this and see what happens, But I was always, as far as I remember, I never bombed out of a meet. And Ryan Kennelly pointed that out to me. I had no idea. Mm-hmm. But the reason is I never tried to open with a PR. I would go to a meet and I don't know if I learned this from Brent or who, but I would go like 87.5%, 95%, 105%. So like I was, my third attempt was always a PR, and that was it. But if I had a really good training, and I felt like I was way stronger, I would open at 90%, then go like for PR on the second, then go for the third.